Happy to invite you to this exclusive Zoom chit-chat coffee time with Jennifer Ransdell, one of the co-authors of, I cannot show that, one of the authors of Courage book that has been launched for October 10th, 2024, to celebrate and to promote World Mental Health Day. The book is a collective work of 25 authors that have shared many stories. And I'm super excited to have Jennifer today with me because from the business background, we are both talking about leadership. And welcome, Jennifer. Happy to have you with me here and with all of us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's jump immediately to the deep waters. You speak in your chapter about isolation. And isolation, we are connected through Zoom. What does it mean in today's world? Because you mentioned about the high statistics. You refer to the Gallup's report. And I am aware there is a huge mental, physical isolation, and I can see it wherever I go. What does it mean? And why you write about also isolation?
Well, I experienced isolation throughout my childhood, and I kind of in my chapter discussed that this was a lot of this was brought upon by experiencing a lot of traumatic death in my early childhood. And I think this was just the hardest mental thing that I went through, not having loved ones and being in an environment where I couldn't I couldn't know happiness. And I love your question on you ask when we speak about loneliness, do we feel that people tend to show us that they're happy on the outside, maybe that they're hiding something inside? And when I looked at that question, it really took me back to my undergrad, which was in my undergrad my path was going to be a psychologist, working with children and families. And so my undergrad was in children's psychology. And I had a professor and took two classes with him. One was close relationships and one was theories of personality.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have discussions over what social media does to what effect social media has on how, on how that contributes to how we feel about ourselves. And so this question of what's the lens that we tend to show people, and is it our true lens, or are we hiding behind that lens? And so it kind of just, that question immediately made me go back to those discussions with that professor and realize that, especially with the younger generation, this is the loneliness epidemic is very prominent, and it's just, and I go, why though? And and I think that social media is a big contributor towards that, because I think that we are conditioning ourselves to how many likes we have on social media, how many contacts we have. When you look at someone's Facebook or Instagram, or even on LinkedIn, like, oh, how many people do they know? How many connections do they have? And I think that has become, unfortunately, just a filter that we either consciously or even I think now conditioned unconsciously as to judging where people are along their journey of life, and maybe where we tend to like instantly judge, oh, okay, well, they don't have as many friends and maybe they're not as popular, and so it is this lens of I think of judgment. And yeah, I think that it does promote kind of this feeling of, oh, I have to look a certain way, or I have to present myself a certain way, and this might not be my authentic self. And maybe I think that there's a disconnect, and I think maybe that might speak to why there are so many people that are unhappy because of that disconnect of what they're feeling pressured to present, but that might not be truly who they are inside. And I think that one way that we can shine a light on that, and I have to say my work that I did was 6 seconds this summer, and 6 seconds is international emotional intelligence. And one thing that I have always realized, even before this, is that we need to really concentrate on emotional intelligence and our ability to, I feel like in this fast-paced, just high stressed environment that we live in today, this volatile VUCA world, where everything constantly is changing. I don't feel like we take enough time to connect with our emotions, and we don't spend enough time with them. I feel like we brush things under the rug. It's move on, move on.
Yeah.
And we don't we just don't spend enough time learning about ourselves and why we feel what we feel. And I think when we start processing our emotions, we can do more connecting on our authentic selves. And I think a big part of that is understanding what we value.
I like what you're saying, social media, disconnection, and actually the foundation of this isolation, because it's not something that is popping up just now when the social media has evolved. I think this kind of isolation is carried by us from our childhood, and the lucky ones are having a happy families, right? And the things are going smoothly. There are these kind of families, and I'm so positively jealous, for these people who had this amazing luck to have stabilized and warm house where the isolation and loneliness didn't come through. But unfortunately, the bigger percentages of those that are having some harms from the childhood. And this is where the root starts of the loneliness, the mental loneliness, the lack of acceptance, the lack of attention. Of course, as a child, we are not able to name it.
Yeah.
We are on kind of adjustment mode. But it doesn't mean there is nothing happening in our brain. And there are already some patterns of the way how we are thinking, how we are creating the judgment, the critical voice towards ourselves, because we are not seen. And 17 years as a teenager, as a part of living in a family for 17 years, being not seen, it must have an impact on the way how you are stepping into your adulthood. And this loneliness, actually, it's creating, I don't know if you agree with me, but this loneliness at the same time will create the incredible hunger that is blowing when you become adult. And then unfortunately you make the massive wrong decisions in your life because you are blurred.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, you know, we're both in organizational psychology, and one thing that my in my undergrad, my capstone was on millennials, and did a ton of research on that generation. And what I love about that generation is that they you know, they grew up, and you know, there's a lot of ridicule. Oh, this generation is all used to getting a trophy handed to them, like they didn't earn anything. And but what we tend to not realize, they are the first digital age generation, but what we tend not to realize is that but by growing up as a collective. So these children, you know, these children were put into so many extracurricular activities. Like their schedules are competitive to what a CEO's schedule looks like. I mean, it was literally mapped out. And so they're used to that kind of wanting that achievement, and wanting to be recognized, and that's their goal. And I think it's aspirational. But what I love about the collective is that I think that this generation of and I call it the next, they are our next leaders. In 2025, 75% of the workforce is millennials. So they are our next leadership, global. And I think what I love about this decade is that because they grew up collectively, where they shared, you know, that everyone gets a trophy, is that it's a lens, it's an external lens that just kind of opens the mind and says, oh, it's not just me in the world, it's other people in the world. And I think that's just a page out of a notebook that we should all kind of remember in our daily lives, is that we're not in this world singular. And I think, and I'm going to circle back to try to connect it with what you said, is that growing up in a family for 17 years and not being seen, that does have an impact. And I can kind of relate to that as well. I grew up in a household that I wasn't seen, and nor was I kind of allowed to be seen. There was oppression there, and I think that I think that does have an impact on you. For me, I did a lot of this, and this is where the psychological capital comes, is that, you know, and I love how you say, well, how do we hold positiveness when it seems like there's only anything but negativeness? And I think that that's self-love, self-compassion. And those are two big words right now. I think both personally and in psychology, in the workforce, is how do we have self-compassion? How do we have self-love? And I do think that it comes from our connection with other people. And I think that one way that we can, and you had brought up, well, how do we heal from trauma? Because that is also, I keep seeing that word, trauma, and you know, trauma affected. And you know, I think there's healthy ways to handle our trauma from our past, and there's unhealthy ways. And I think that, you know, in dealing with that, whether we try to do the self work, or we get help from the external environment, it still comes down to self-love and self-compassion. And I think it goes back to, and a lot of your chapter is about what we tell ourselves, So for me, in my situation, I felt as if the environment wanted to see me fail, wanted me to believe a certain thing. And I knew I had enough resources from people that showed me love, and family members that were gone, but I had enough resources that I drew upon that told me different, that said, no, you are worthy, you are strong, you are you're not this. And it was enough to just it was enough to make me fight and say, okay, I know I'm worthy. I know I can do great things. I know that there's a life out there that, you know, I'm going to be of good to someone and help someone. And I think that's what we all truly want to be. We all truly want to be someone that,
Yeah.
that, yeah, that helps people, and that people love. And I mean, that's just it's a basic need to be loved.
I think it's easy for us to say from the position where we are standing now, because I believe we are having a huge knowledge about not just the psychological momentum of growth, but we have developed this understanding of emotional intelligence, understanding of the psychological capital through the studying and working with people around leadership. But I think if someone would talk to me the way how we are discussing the subject, and me being the 17, 18, I don't think I would understand what people are talking to me about, because my mindset was not ready. And many people are going through, when you are in this survival mode, certain areas of your brain are blocked, are frozen, because you are focused on survival in that conditions. And of course, we cannot compare various traumas people are going through. At the same time, we cannot diminish the others just because the is lighter or having a lighter impact on our life. And as you said about the psychological capital, how to build psychological capital for the young people who are going through various turbulences in their life and they are lost, they don't know what to do. They might not know that they are lost. They might not be aware that they are on the wrong track because the hunger blurring sides, right?
You're right. The flight or fright state of our, when we're in fight or flight state of mind, it literally stops our thinking brain. So we can't reason. And you're right, all of our resources go to protecting ourselves. And I find, listening to your story, I have found that, a majority, and answering some of your questions pre our interview, one thing I did learn, and I share this because I think it's important for people to understand, especially for those that have had any type of trauma in childhood. One thing I learned that was very significant to me was our family of origin. It comes with us. We carry it through our lives. And so, for me, I literally thought, oh, and you might be able to just kind of understand how this felt. Once I turned 18, moved away, I was like, I'm done. This has nothing to do with me. Moving on. And it's it unfortunately, what I knew as in that environment is exactly what I went to, what I gravitated towards, what I was attracted towards in my next, years. And so in when I was going through my divorce, which was about the time I was in college, I realized hearing this is that wow, now I can kind of understand why I went from this environment and then to my next environment is because I was carrying my family of origin and that trauma and just
Yeah.
it kept me there. And so kind of to answer uh everything really kind of like full circle is we do have to address that trauma. And it starts with us. One thing I learned, and it isn't in psychology, it's kind of a deserted theory now, but it did have some weight, I think, back in the 60s, called the Bowen theory. And basically it's being responsible for as you say, being our own author, being responsible for how we feel. And so I would say to this, as to what advice we can give to young people that uh, younger generations that haven't had the experience or the time to process. As you say, you and I have had the experience and the years of processing that we're here now. But what do you say to someone that is closer to that trauma, hasn't had the experience for the years to kind of process through it?
Yeah.
What do you say to them to help them? And and then how do we create positive emotions or psychological capital? And I think it really does come back to self-love, self-compassion. And I know that kind of maybe seems empty without like saying how to do that. One of the greatest things that I love in psychology is, and I tell it to people all the time because I hear young people go, "You make me happy." And
Yeah.
I go, "Oh my God, no, 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 don't say that." No one can make us happy. We are, as
That's
you
true.
say, we are the only ones that can make ourselves happy.
Yeah.
We are the only ones or you make me angry or you make me, and you highlight that in your book. We are the only ones that produce our own feelings.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about self-love, self-compassion to heal ourselves, um, our brains are wonderful, wonderful things. We don't even understand really the backstory of what our brains are doing to protect ourselves, to get us through hard times. It's that you said, what's the difference between resilience and
Yes.
assertiveness?
Yes.
And I loved that question. It really it had me thinking. I was like, oh, okay, this is a good one. Um,
Good one.
and and so if we thought about this kind of like as an analogy, resilience is our foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's kind of it we add to it over the years, and it's our inner strength. It's our mental foundation, it's our spiritual foundation, it's our psychological, physiological, it's all that. It's our foundation that we just add to. And I thought, okay, well, what is then how does assertiveness kind of collaborate with that or coexist in that. And assertiveness to me, it's an action. It's a brick. If you think about resilience as our foundation and we're the builder, then assertiveness is a brick that we keep adding, we keep building our own castle, we keep adding to that, to
Mm-hmm.
that foundation. And so assertiveness is an action. So if I'm like, say I wake up and I'm having a hard time and I haven't even gotten dressed for work and I'm just having a hard time. I'm depressed, not looking forward to going into work. What assertive action what brick can I put towards that foundation to just inch me along, to create a little bit more strength. Think of that little choo-choo train trying to get up the hill.
Yeah.
And he said, I think I can, I think I can. What is the brick? And it's, so again, self-love, self-compassion. So what does that mean? It means, for me, it meant, okay, there is a lot of unhappiness around me. It apparently, this is what is, I felt was the driver to try to squash me, to try to push me down. And so what could I do different? What did I have control of? As you pointed out, as children, we don't really have a whole lot of control. And maybe even as younger people in their lives feel like they don't have a whole lot of control in their circumstances. Well, what makes us happy? I love music. Um, I love reading, and those resources really did contribute to keeping me mentally healthy and happy, and building that resilience through my childhood was reading.
Reading. I didn't like reading, especially because in Polish school we were having, when I was a teenager, we were having books as a must to read about war. So like, oh my God, I want to play with my Barbie, not reading, not reading the books about war and crusade
Yeah.
and so on. And also when I was growing up, it was the music, it was the cassettes that you were reviewing and forward with the pencil, right? The old Walkmans.
Yes,
The
all Walkmans, yes.
loudspeaker. Loudspeaker, and of course Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and all this heavy thing just to keep me
Yep.
woken up and kill somehow the negativity.
Yeah.
That is also
The,
very interesting. And that time I didn't understand what they are singing about because
yeah.
my English, there was no English that time in my mind. So if you heard some word, you were screaming and you were shouting more into music rather than the lyrics. But you did music on the loudest volume because it could release
Vibration.
this, vibrate and release this kind of negativity and turn it into fake endorphin, I would rather say. That was a fake endorphin. Yeah, and many people are going through it. So I want to ask also about going back to this loneliness and isolation. And you mentioned about social media is creating, I will say, red carpet for it, because self-love. How can I love myself if I hear I'm not enough, if I hear critics, if I hear I'm ugly, if I hear I'm fat, if I hear I'm stupid? The very basic words, right? But in many forms, they can be transferred to people.
Yep.
Then, okay, I will close myself. I will find the best suitable mask that I can carry on. And then we are losing connection with ourselves. And this is what you mentioned about disengagement, disconnection. So one action is related with so many factors. It's not possible to handle by one person on one drive.
No. I love at the end of your chapter, you really touch on culture and people growth. And I really think that in a organizational context, and I think honestly, let's be real, our personal lives, our professional lives, they're intertwined. And when we're happy at work, we're happy. We take that. That transfers home with us. And that transfers into our relationships outside of work. So the two lives are commingled and dependent on our mental well-being, our mental state of mind. And I too worry about social media, but I think there's also something else that we should be even more concerned about is AI. And
Mm,
you know, kind of looking, since one of the techniques that I used during childhood, and it was a survival technique, and I to handle trauma, and I'm sure other people have used it, is to take yourself out of the present and focus on the long term.
mm,
It's a way to mentally not kind of concentrate where you're at, but focus on what's possible down the road. And that is part of the psychological capital.